300 men against an empire. 300 men who chose death so that you could be free. But here's what they never told you in school. Thermopylae was not the beginning, and it was not the end. The real story, the whole story, is far darker, far more brilliant, and far more human than any Hollywood film could ever show you. Stay with us, because by the end of this documentary, you will understand why the Greco-Persian Wars didn't just save Greece. They saved the entire idea of Western civilization. To understand the Greco-Persian Wars, we must first understand the world they shattered. The year is 550 BCE. Somewhere in the highlands of modern-day Iran, a man named Cyrus the Great is doing something that has never been done before. He is building an empire. Not a kingdom, not a city-state, an empire, stretching from the Aegean coast to the borders of India, from the frozen steppes of Central Asia to the burning sands of Egypt. The Achaemenid Persian Empire, the largest political entity the ancient world had ever seen. And at its heart, a philosophy. Cyrus believed that conquered peoples should keep their laws, their gods, their language. He was, in many ways, the ancient world's most enlightened conqueror. But empires have a logic of their own, and that logic always points outward. Meanwhile, across the Aegean Sea, something else entirely was being born. In a collection of rocky peninsulas, sun-bleached islands, and wind-scraped valleys lived a people who should, by all logic, have meant nothing to history. They had no single king, no unified army, no empire. They had hundreds of city-states, polis, each jealously guarding its own laws, its own gods, its own identity. They argued constantly. They went to war with each other almost as often as they breathed. And yet, these fractious, impossible, gloriously stubborn people were about to produce something the world had never imagined. The idea that ordinary citizens had the right to govern themselves. Athens was experimenting with democracy, demokratia, rule by the people. Sparta was perfecting the most extraordinary military machine in human history. Corinth was getting rich on trade. Thebes was developing military tactics centuries ahead of their time. Each city a different answer to the question, what should a human life be? Let us talk about Sparta. Because you cannot understand the Greco-Persian Wars without understanding Sparta, and you cannot understand Sparta without confronting the fact that it was terrifying. At birth, Spartan elders examined every newborn child, the weak, the deformed, taken to the Apothetai, a chasm on Mount Taygetus, and thrown in. This is not myth. This is Plutarch. This is archaeology. Sparta was built on a philosophy so extreme, so total, that it reshaped human biology through selection. They were engineering a people. At age 7, Spartan boys were taken from their mothers and enrolled in the agoge, the most brutal educational system ever devised. No shoes, minimal food, forced to steal, and beaten not for stealing, but for being caught. They slept on beds of river reeds they cut with their own hands. They fought each other. They were flogged at the altar of Artemis or Thea until they bled or fell unconscious. They were trained to endure anything. Heavy, rhythmic, like a heartbeat made of iron. By age 20, a Spartan man had one identity, one purpose, one truth. He was a Spartiate, a warrior citizen, and he would rather die than show weakness. The word they used? Molon labe. Come and take them. We'll come back to those words at the hot gates. But first, remember them because they define everything. Shift Sparta was also a paradox. Spartan women were the most free women in all of Greece. They ran estates, they owned property, they were educated. A Spartan mother's famous farewell to her son going to war? Return with your shield or on it. Not as cruelty, as honor. And beneath all of Sparta's glory lay a horror they rarely discussed. The Helots. Enslaved Greeks, mostly Messenians, who outnumbered the Spartans 7-1. Every year, Sparta formally declared war on the Helots, just so killing them required no legal justification. The entire Spartan military machine existed, at least in part, to keep these people in chains. This is the other side of the shield. If Sparta was iron, Athens was fire. Where Sparta enforced silence, Athens thrived on noise, on argument, on theater, on philosophy shouted across sun-drenched marketplaces. By 508 BCE, an Athenian reformer named Cleisthenes had done something revolutionary. He had created the world's first democracy. Not a perfect democracy by our standards. Women, slaves, and foreigners were excluded. But for citizen men, they voted directly on laws, on wars, on the fate of generals. Every voice mattered. Think about what that meant in a world run entirely by kings, priests, and aristocrats. Athens was saying, you are capable of governing yourself. That idea, that single, fragile, radical idea, is what Persia was about to try to crush. And here's the irony that will haunt this entire story. Athens called for Persian help once. They invited the wolf to guard the sheep. And the wolf never forgot. In 507 BCE, Athens, threatened by Sparta and Corinth simultaneously, sent ambassadors to the Persian court of Darius I. The ambassadors offered earth and water, the symbols of submission to Persia. Darius accepted. Athens, panicking, later repudiated the agreement. But Darius wrote it down. The sound of a king recording a grudge. Sound of a city 499 BCE. The Greek cities of Ionia, the western coast of Anatolia, have been under Persian rule for decades. They pay taxes to Persia. Their rulers are Persian-appointed tyrants, and they have had enough. Led by Aristagoras of Miletus, a man who was, frankly, more desperate politician than idealist, the Ionian Greeks rose in revolt. They burned the Persian regional capital of Sardis, and then they looked across the Aegean for help. Oars in the sea. Sparta said no. Athens, newly democratic, newly proud, sent 20 ships. Eretria, a small city on Euboea, sent 5. 25 ships against the greatest empire on earth. The revolt lasted 6 years. In the end, the Persians crushed it completely. The city of Miletus, birthplace of philosophy, home of Thales and Anaximander, was burned to the ground, its population massacred or enslaved. And Darius I, King of kings, Lord of all lands, master of the Persian Empire, he did not forget. According to ancient sources, Darius commanded a servant to whisper to him 3 times at every dinner, "Master, remember the Athenians." He was going to make them pay, and his plan was coming. at them at a full sprint. The Persians loosed their arrows. Many fell, but those who reached the Persian line hit like a bronze wave. Miltiades had thinned his center and strengthened his flanks. The Persians pushed through the center and walked into a trap. The Greek wings wheeled inward, surrounding the Persian breakthrough. It became a massacre. 6,400 Persians dead on the plain of Marathon. 192 Athenians. 192. And then, the story we all know, whether it's entirely true or not. A runner named Phidippides, or perhaps Euclides, ran the 26 miles from Marathon to Athens. He burst into the assembly. He said, "Nenike kamen, we have won," and he fell dead. Every marathon race in the world today, every one, runs that distance in his memory. The ghost of Marathon runs in the shoes of millions. But here's what the victory at Marathon actually accomplished. It proved something dangerous, something that would change everything. It proved that Persians could bleed. Darius died in 486 BCE, before he could return to Greece. But he had a son who had been raised on stories of Marathon, a son who saw the defeat not as a lesson, but as an insult. His name was Xerxes. And Xerxes was going to do what his father could not. He was going to bring all of Persia to Greece. Ancient sources, Herodotus among them, claim Xerxes assembled an army of over 1 million men. Modern historians estimate it at perhaps 150,000 to 250,000. Even that more conservative number was staggering for the ancient world. It was the largest army assembled in history up to that point. Meanwhile, in Athens, a brilliant, controversial, and deeply polarizing politician was making a bet. Themistocles had looked at a new silver vein discovered at Laurion and seen not money, but ships. He convinced Athens to build a fleet, 180 triremes. In a few years, almost the entire Athenian economy poured into wood and bronze and ore. Nobody trusted Themistocles completely. He was too clever, too ambitious. But he may have been the single person most responsible for saving Western civilization. Stay with us. 480 BCE, Xerxes crossed the Hellespont, the narrow strait between Asia and Europe, on a bridge of boats. 2 bridges, actually. One for the army, one for the supplies. The greatest military force ever assembled was walking into Europe. Most of Greece surrendered without a fight. The northern Greek states, Thessaly, Boeotia, Macedonia, submitted and offered earth and water. They would collaborate with Persia. History calls them Medizers. They chose survival. Who can blame them? Who are we to judge from 2,500 years away? But a coalition of 31 Greek city-states decided to resist. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Aegina, Phocis. They called themselves the Hellenic League. Themistocles and the Spartan king Leonidas agreed on a 2-part strategy. The Spartan fleet would hold the Strait of Artemisium at sea. The Spartan land forces would block the coastal pass of Thermopylae, the Hot Gates, where the mountains came so close to the sea that an army could only pass in single file. In that pass, numbers meant nothing. A small force could hold forever, or die trying. Leonidas took 300 Spartans. He chose them carefully, men who already had sons to carry on their bloodlines. He knew what this mission was. He also took roughly 6,000 other Greeks, Thespians, Thebans, Phocians, and others. We often forget them. We shouldn't. Leonidas reportedly said, when asked why he brought so few men, "Enough to die." Hold that thought. We'll come back to what it means. For 2 days, Xerxes waited. He couldn't believe this small force was serious. He sent scouts. The scouts came back and reported something strange. The Spartans were grooming their hair, combing it, oiling it, before battle. Then, a Greek exile named Demaratus, a former Spartan king, explained it to Xerxes. "These men have come to dispute the pass with us. They are preparing to die. It is their custom, when they are about to risk their lives, to adorn their heads." Xerxes, watching from his throne, reportedly leaped to his feet 3 times in terror for his men. His greatest army on earth, stopped by a few thousand Greeks in a narrow pass. And then a Greek named Ephialtes, a traitor, a man who knew the mountains, came to Xerxes. He showed him a mountain path that went around the pass, a path that would put Persian soldiers behind the Greeks by morning. Leonidas found out at dawn. He sent most of the Greeks away. There was no point in all of them dying now. The pass was lost. But someone had to stay and buy time for the retreat. Someone had to make the Persians fight for every inch. The 300 Spartans stayed. The 700 Thespians stayed, refusing to leave. Their city would be destroyed by Persia soon. They had no illusions. Some of the Thebans stayed, perhaps unwillingly. Dawn, then, the sound of an army filling the horizon. They came out of the pass to fight in the open, knowing they would die. They fought until their spears broke, then they drew swords, then they used their hands, then they died. "Come and take them." Remember those words? At the hot gates, Leonidas had his men's weapons. The Persians had to come and take them. Over the bodies of 300 men and 700 Thespians who had chosen this moment to define what it meant to be free. The sound of 300 men fading into history. The epitaph written on the stone at Thermopylae, attributed to the poet Simonides. "Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie." Then they charged. The most enormous naval battle sound, rams hitting wood, ships breaking, men drowning and screaming, the churning of oars, the crack of timber. The Persian ships, crowded in the narrow strait, could barely turn. Greek triremes rammed them broadside. Ship after ship broke apart. Persian sailors, many of whom couldn't swim, drowned in the sight of their king. Xerxes watched from a golden throne on the shore. He watched his fleet destroyed. He watched the greatest navy in the ancient world reduced to debris and bodies. He reportedly wept. Salamis was the pivot of the ancient world. Xerxes could not maintain supply lines to a massive army in Greece without a fleet. He retreated to Asia with much of his army. He left his general, Mardonius, with a substantial force to finish the job. But the tide had turned. The initiative had shifted. Themistocles, the man nobody fully trusted, the man who spent Athens' silver on ships instead of dividing it equally, the man who tricked Xerxes himself, had just saved Greek civilization. Remember what we said about him at the beginning? The sound of a vast army encamped. 479 BCE, Mardonius and his Persian army, perhaps 80,000 strong, occupied central Greece. The Hellenic League assembled its largest force ever, roughly 38,000 hoplites plus light troops. For the first and last time, Sparta and Athens fought side by side. The two armies maneuvered for weeks around the plain of Plataea. Then, Mardonius made a mistake. He attacked the Spartan division. The Spartans had been under Persian arrow fire for hours. Their general, Pausanias, refused to give the order to advance until the omens were right. Men died around him. He prayed. He waited. And then, the omens cleared. Then the thunder of 10,000 Spartans advancing. Mardonius was killed in the fighting. With him died the Persian army's will to fight. They fled. Many were cut down in the pursuit. The Persian camp, with all its incredible wealth, its golden tents, its silver and treasure, fell to the Greeks. And on the same day, the Greek fleet destroyed what remained of the Persian navy at the Battle of Mycale on the coast of Asia Minor. On the same day, as if history had staged it. What had just happened? Step back from the battles. Step back from the spears and the bronze and the burning cities. What had actually occurred in the space of 20 years? A tiny collection of squabbling, imperfect, often hypocritical city-states had faced the most powerful empire on earth. They had been outnumbered, out-resourced, outspent. They had burned their own city rather than surrender it. They had died in mountain passes and fought on the sea and bled on summer plains, and they had won. The victory of the Hellenic League did not just save Greece. It preserved the space, the fragile, impossible, necessary space in which democracy could grow, in which philosophy could ask its questions, in which theater could hold a mirror to human life, in which science could measure the world. Every courtroom that uses evidence rather than royal decree. Every parliament where elected voices argue. Every university where ideas can be tested and challenged. Every work of art that questions authority. Every scientist who doubts a prevailing theory. All of it traces a thread through Rome, through the Renaissance, through the Enlightenment, back to that narrow pass, that gray sea, that burning city. Back to people who decided that some things were worth dying for. 300 men chose death so that others could be free. They weren't the only ones. The 700 Thespians chose it too. The sailors at Salamis chose it. The hoplites at Plataea chose it. And Athens, emptied, burned, reduced to ash, was rebuilt. Democracy rebuilt it. The people rebuilt it. Because an idea, once truly alive in human hearts, cannot be burned. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. A single drum, slow, fading, then silence. Then, from the silence, a crowd, not ancient, modern, alive. The distant echo of a civilization that survived. They held, against everything. They held. Thank you.